Hello, welcome to Feasting on the Word for this week. It is February the 12th, 2025, and we are plunging into this ancient discipline of this church, this ancient rhythm of the church, which immerses us in God's Word, but does it in a way that is manageable, that doesn't feel overwhelming, because as we look at the Bible, it can be so difficult to figure out where to start, how much we should read, and how to make sense of things. And so, one of the things that arose in monastic traditions was to take a very small piece of passage and to live with it. So, to hear that passage several times with only silence, oftentimes maybe even multiple times a day, so that with each encounter, you really kind of begin to appreciate all it had to speak and say and inform one. This was called Lectio Divina in its ancient form. It's called feasting on the Word, or modernized towards that, in a sense that through our four readings, it is as if we kind of take a bite, and then the second reading is like starting to really chew on it, and the third reading is like really kind of appreciating its flavors, what it says, and the fourth reading is incorporating it into our life, so swallowing it down, hence feasting on the Word. I like to have something to write with and something to write on nearby, nearby, so that I can write down my impressions as the passage is read, particularly preparing for the longer period of silence which follows the third reading, a 3-minute period, which is an opportunity for us to turn to God in conversation, in prayer. And that's taking this passage and how it's inspiring us, confusing us, whatever it might be, and to lift that up in conversation, in dialogue, in prayer with God. We also use 4 different translations as a little modernization of this ancient discipline. So we have the New Revised Standard, then a minute of silence, then the Message and a minute of silence, and then the Contemporary English, and then our longer 3-minute period of silence. And we conclude with the New International Version. So, let's jump into it for this week. Our passage is the same that we will hear on Sunday, and the same that we explored also in Exploring Sunday Scriptures yesterday. And that is the parable of weeds among the wheat, and it comes to us from Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30, first from the New Revised Standard Version. Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, An enemy has done this. The slave said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, No. For in gathering the weeds you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at the harvest time I will tell the reapers, Collect the weeds first, and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. Our second reading of Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30 from the Message translation. Jesus told another story. God's kingdom is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. That night, while his hired men were asleep, his enemy sowed thistles all through the wheat and slipped away before dawn. When the first green shoots appeared and the grain began to form, the thistles showed up too. The farmhands came to the farmer and said, "Master, that was clean seed you planted, wasn't it? Where did these thistles come from?" He answered, "Some enemy did this." The farmhands asked, "Should we weed out the thistles?" He said, "No, if you weed the thistles, you'll pull up the wheat too. Let them grow together until harvest time. Then I'll instruct the harvesters to pull up the thistles and tie them in bundles for the fire. Then gather the wheat and put it into my barn." Our third reading of Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30 from the Contemporary English, with our longer period of silence to follow. Jesus then told them this story. The kingdom of heaven is like what happened when a farmer scattered good seed in a field. But while everybody was sleeping, an enemy came and scattered weed seeds in the field and then left. When the plants came up and began to mature, the farmer's servants could see the weeds. The servants came and asked, "Sir, didn't you scatter good seed in your field? Where'd these weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. His servants then asked, "Do you want us to go out and pull up the weeds?" "No," he answered, "you might also pull up the wheat. Leave the weeds alone until harvest time. Then I'll tell my workers to gather the weeds and tie them up and burn them. But I'll order them to store the wheat in my barn." Our fourth and final reading from the New International Version of Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, 'First collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn.'" This is the inspired word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.